You can really hear me. All right. Well, it is an absolute honor to be here with you all today, um, and to be with this awesome group of clinicians and experts in mental health areas. And I just want to name that I think it's fantastic that the Alison Tobey Smart Foundation is honoring and recognizing mental health and bringing information to you all. I think it's really important, and I'm glad that you're all here. I suspect you're here for really good reasons. I'm going to make my comments here pretty brief. I'm going to be moderating today and be handing off the microphone and then sort of facilitating the Q&A later. So I'm a psychologist at Family Service Center, co-executive director there, and have been practicing for about 20 years, and have really shifted into doing a lot of work around adolescent mental health and parenting. So the frame in which I'm coming at is that trauma-informed frame as well. I would suspect that you're here to learn a little bit about the adolescent mental health landscape, more specific information about these specific challenges, and really how to support your adolescent. And I find myself wanting to name that our adolescents are facing different kinds of challenges than we have faced as parents back in the day when we were youth, right, in adolescence, and that our community also sets up a unique kind of experience and context for our adolescents. We were actually talking a little bit before you guys all came in, and a few of these folks were commenting on some of the things that I'd planned to talk about, just that our youth are really faced with this frame of a high-achieving community, a relatively affluent community that has lots of successful people in it. And even when parents are supportive and encouraging them to be themselves, they're looking around and seeing some of the great things that are accomplished in the community, which is awesome in a lot of ways, but can be hard as an adolescent who's growing and developing, right? So there's a pressure around perfectionism in the community. When you couple that with the things that they face that we didn't as youth, so the onset of the technology and social media, we think about the way in which they're scrutinized, really more so, kind of 24/7, having to be on and present a very particular way, feeling that pressure to behave in a particular way, having their choices and their behaviors following them kind of indefinitely in the digital footprint, and also thinking about how culturally they're in an environment that's different than ours. They wake up and if they turn on the news, they won't turn on the news. When they look at their social media feed, they will likely see information about a mass shooting. They may know someone who was in it. They may have been in it themselves at this point. They're also in a culture, in a community where, highly polarized topics are sort of bombarded in their face very regularly, whether it's about race, gun control, human rights, LGBTQ plus community. Like, they are faced with lots of really difficult tasks and topics and things that are going on, and lots of conflict around it. And this is the environment in which they're trying to grow and develop and thrive. So, I will say that adolescent mental health issues were present before COVID, in the context that I just laid out, and that COVID has exacerbated that in a lot of ways, right? And so when we think about the way in which COVID impacted us and our kids, we think about loss, we think about trauma, we think about that isolation, the years that were lost in terms of communication and connection, and how everything that we did was through technology in the vast majority of ways, right? Whether it was school, socializing, connecting. It was really through technology. So there are ways in which that has also negatively impacted mental health. So I want to just name really quickly here, parenting is hard. I'm a parent, I'm a psychologist. I think it's the hardest job, the parenting one is the hardest job probably on the face of the planet. And I think that we don't have any, manual that tells us how to do it. I'm aware that as we talk about these mental health challenges, they can feel really daunting. And what I want to do here in setting this up is to encourage you guys to think a little bit about your role as a parent and the way in which you prioritize competing demands as your role as a parent, and to think about how you want to prioritize them differently to support your adolescents, possibly differently, maybe not. So when you think about what motivates you and guides your parenting decisions, what things come to mind? What is your role as a parent? People can yell things out, or I can just kind of list some things. You want your kid to follow the rules. You want them to get good grades. You want to get them into college. You want them to get into college. Lots of different things, right? You want to teach them. You want to clarify expectations. Do you feel like it's your job to make them happy? Is it your job to advocate for them? You know, to help them be the best versions of themselves that they can be? We have lots of different competing needs around and ideas as a parent about what we sort of should be doing, right? And then there's also practical considerations like time and energy and resources and bandwidth. What I want you to do is think about how do you prioritize the specific relationship piece of your relationship with your kid, right? As opposed to those specific things where you get down in the nitty gritty. I love this slide. Trees obscuring view of forest. Like when you get down in the nitty gritty and you don't see and protect the relationship, it can really cause an undercut and undermine the strength of that relationship. We know that the parent-child relationship is a protective factor in mental health, and we know it's a protective factor in a lot of ways, and we want to really think about how you can protect it and show up and connect with your kiddo to be able to support them. That's a whole nother presentation, but I wanted to plant the seed. There are lots of ways that we can think about doing that, but as you're hearing from these guys, I think it's important to kind of bear in mind. This is a great quote, and I will just read it. The principles of communicating effectively with kids actually haven't changed since the 1980s. Listening carefully and respectfully, understanding, offering advice, not trying to ram our perspective down our kids' throats, working problems out respectfully. These apply to every parenting challenge in every generation. We just need to remember to apply them to the new frontier. So I say that, again, to encourage you to think about ways in which you can prioritize that relationship with your adolescent. When they're having these struggles, you want them to trust you and to come to you and to look to you for some support to be able to move forward. We don't want them going on the internet or to random people or, turning in the directions that won't be helpful to them. So you want to keep those doors open, keep that communication going, and focus on that big relationship. Having said that, I'm going to shift and have Peggy come on up and talk about depression.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So if I move away from the microphone, can you hear me in the back? I've got a big mouth, big long mouth. So I'm Peggy Kubert. I'm the Senior Director of Education for Erika's Lighthouse. I'm a training. I've been working in the field of mental health since 1982. So, yes, I'm old. What I'm going to do in my approximately 15 minutes is just kind of give you a little overview of what Erika's Lighthouse is all about. I'm going to have the opportunity to talk a little bit broader about what mental health is, because all of us fall under the rubric of mental health. Whether you're talking about depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, stress, it's all under this umbrella of what is mental health. And then I'm going to dive into the signs and symptoms of depression, signs and symptoms specifically that relate to teens, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about what your role is in how to support a kid that you might be concerned about, whether it's your own child or the child that's hanging out in your basement or your niece or your nephew. So Erika's Lighthouse was founded in 2004, and we were founded because of the loss of a young girl named Erika, who was a resident in Winnetka. Erika was 14 years old, an 8th grader at Washburn, and she died by suicide. She died from her depression. And when she died, and her parents realized that you can lose a child to something that nobody knew how to talk about or was willing to talk about, that's when our mission was formed. And our mission has remained the same since 2004. It's to raise awareness of teen depression and to encourage good mental health and to break down the stigma which makes it really hard to talk about this stuff. All of our programs are free. And if you have a child that is in school at New Trier Township, no matter what community you're coming from, they have gone through an Erika's Lighthouse program. So they may not know it by name, but they know the messages that we are putting out there. And we address not only teen depression with children and kids, but we train educators, we train parents, and they all have the same core messages. The core messages that we have had from the very beginning is that depression is real. It is not your child being dramatic. It is not, it used to be emo. There's signs and symptoms. There's changes in the brain. This is a real mood disorder, and it's common. We didn't know how common it was back in 2004. Erika thought it was so bizarre to be 14 and struggling with depression. But what we know now is that 15 to 20% of young people will have an episode of clinical depression before the age of 20. So that works out to about 5 kids in a class of 25. That's a lot of kids. So it is common to struggle with depression or any other mental health disorder right now. It's serious. 90 to 98% of young people who have died by suicide have a diagnosable mental illness. So it can kill you. But the good news is this is really a very treatable illness. But the treatment can be as simple as having a conversation with somebody and they now feel heard and supported, to young people who have multiple hospitalizations and multiple medications, just to be able to put one foot in front of the other. So there's a very wide continuum. Unfortunately, getting treatment is hard. We are very fortunate that we live in a community that is rich with resources, but there are a lot of young people who are not getting the help that they deserve. And the other key message that we want you to understand, and we want our children to understand, is that everyone deserves to have good mental health. In the beginning, we were so focused to make sure everyone understood the signs and symptoms of depression. But it's just as important to understand what is mental health and how do I enhance my mental health and how do I know when I need help to support my mental health. And the last key message that we put out is that there is always hope and you are never alone. Because depression is characterized by hopelessness. And if any of you have had a parent, a child, anyone in your family going through depression, it can feel like totally hopeless, and that is not the case. And that's what we want our young people to understand. So, mental health. We all have mental health. And what we want everyone to understand is it's just as important to be talking about our mental health as it is to be talking about our physical health. Now, some days we're feeling really good. And some days, we were joking, the sun came out for about 20 minutes today, but like last Wednesday, our mental health was challenged, if you remember the dark and the rain and the ick and all of that. So some days we're feeling great and some days we're not. And those are everyday feelings, okay? They come, they go, we're happy, we're sad. And then there's overwhelming feelings. And this is how we explain it to our 6th graders in the program that they go through in your schools. Overwhelming feelings are feelings that just kind of hang around and don't seem to go away. And they seem to interrupt your feelings, your behaviors, your everyday life. That is an overwhelming feeling. So some examples of everyday feelings could be happy, sad, disappointed, excited, anxious, stressed. Those are all everyday feelings. Overwhelming feelings that hang around could include loss, despair, grief. And I just want to make a mention of grief, because grief and depression can look very, very similar. But grief is a normal reaction to a loss, a death, the loss of the college you thought you were going to get into, the loss of the soccer team you thought you were going to make. But grief comes and goes in waves, particularly around a remembrance of a person that we've lost. Depression, as you're going to see when I define it for you, hangs around for 2 weeks or longer and doesn't come in waves, doesn't come and go. So here is a slide on youth mental health in general. You've all probably heard that there's been the Center for Disease Control recently, like in the last 2 weeks, came out with some new numbers. These are not completely updated for the new numbers, but they're still pretty spot on. The picture is worse than what these statistics have to say. That we're talking about 1 in 5 kids are diagnosed with a mental illness. Lots of kids are not getting the treatment that they deserve. This one is accurate. The emergency room visits, 51% for adolescent girls. Adolescent girls are struggling right now. Mental health disorders typically in young people surface around the age of 14. But I love this last point here. One supportive adult can make a huge difference in the mental health of a person. One trusted adult can reduce the likelihood of suicide by 40%. It may be you, it may be grandma, it may be a pastor, it may be somebody in the community, it could be a trusted teacher. It may not always be you, mom and dad. But that's the encouraging note here. So youth mental health and depression. This is specifically related to depression. Depression is the most common mental health disorder among teens. Here are some more numbers on the rates. Depression is often accompanied by other disorders, anxiety primarily, stress, other behavior disorders. Suicide is still the second leading cause of death of young people. Suicide, in those of you who have college students, is scary. It's rampant on college campuses right now. Mental health challenges on college campuses are rampant right now. So let's dig in and look a little bit about the signs and symptoms of depression. This is how a psychiatrist or a psychologist would diagnose depression, and it's complicated. You have to have 5 or more of these symptoms. They have to last 2 weeks or longer, and pretty much 24/7. So you have to have either a feeling of sadness or a depressed mood, and you have to have a loss of interest in pleasure, activities that you once enjoyed. It's not like I'm going to quit piano and I never loved piano. It's like I'm giving up football and I lived and breathed for football. I don't hang out with my friends anymore. And then you have to have some of these other signs and symptoms. I'm going to dig a little deeper in the next slide, how it pertains more to teens. So, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, you often see these in young people, loss of energy. So, it's complicated to come up with a diagnosis of depression. For teens, you are going to see more irritability than you're going to see that kind of sad, depressed mood. They're anxious, they're uncomfortable, they're often have this self-defeating attitude of I can't do anything right, nothing ever goes my way, nobody cares about me. Bizarre sleeping patterns, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, more time in bed but less time sleeping. Substance use, risk-taking behavior, acting out, problems in schools. Girls have much higher rates, no longer slightly higher rates than boys, but boys are more likely to be successful in suicide. This is also changing with girls. Girls are becoming more lethal in their attempts to take their own lives. So who's at risk? Everybody, anybody. If you know that you have a family history of depression, there's a genetic component to it. You are more likely at risk to have depression if it runs in your family. Certain physical illnesses, certain learning disabilities, ACEs, that's trauma, stress, sexual abuse, physical abuse. Major changes, trauma, or stress. We all have stress, but it's that chronic, continual stress that can tip somebody into higher risk for depression. So, what can we do? You want to keep an eye out on your kids' behavior. What you are looking for are changes in behavior that are atypical for your child. You can expect these rapidly growing bodies and these gangly kids. You can expect hormones. You can expect mood changes. You can expect your kids to be irritable. That doesn't mean they have depression. They're going to want to hang out with their friends more. They're going to be more interested in peers than they are in you. They're going to have more time behind the door than hanging out with grandma and you. That's all typical adolescent behavior. But what you're looking for are thoughts and behaviors, thoughts and emotions, thoughts in changes, just what seems not the typical pattern that your child has. That's something that you're looking for over time. So, what else can you do? This is some of what Renee was talking about. Small changes can really help support someone's mental health. Making sure our kids are eating healthy and nutritious meals. Easy. Practicing mindfulness, just being thoughtful about your day. Starting off your day with meditation, prayer, just something rather than just charging into the day. Making sure your kids are getting sleep. As they age, it's harder and harder, but encouraging exercise, okay? And then conversation. Asking your kids how they feel. You may not get anything more than a grunt back, but you are opening a door to a conversation. It is really important to let your kids know when you are struggling. How do you cope when you are having a bad day? What do you do to change your mood? You know, in our house it was bubble bath therapy. I have had it, I'm done. I am going upstairs for a bubble bath because you guys are driving me crazy. It's okay to let kids know that you struggle. Now, you're not going to go home and, say, I lost my job. I don't know if we're going to have the mortgage anymore. We're having to move. That's not age appropriate. But to let your kids know that, we're not all perfect. We struggle too. And for younger kids, there's emojis that you can use, a feelings thermometer. All these resources are available to you on the Erika's Lighthouse website. I'm going to tell you really quickly how to get there. So, talking to your child. Nobody wants to have a difficult conversation with their child, but this is a conversation starter. I notice you haven't smiled lately. I notice you are picking fights with your brother. I notice you've been really moody. I care about you. Are you okay? And you want to do this in a protected environment because they may say, no, everything's falling apart. You're not going to do it while you're cooking dinner. Although being in the car when you're in the back seat and you're in the front seat and they think no eye contact, that's also a good place to have a conversation. It's not your fault. We will work this out. We will find someone to help you with this. You deserve to feel better. It's a really powerful line that a parent can say to a child. You deserve better than this. And I'm worried about you. And do you want to talk to someone? And it doesn't have to be me. Who else could you want to talk to? So, parents and family members often notice problems before anybody else, but teachers are also your advocates and your support. Call the school. This is what I'm seeing at home. Do you see this at school? My daughter was an angel at school and then came home and had a total meltdown. And I remember my pediatrician saying, well, at least she saved it for you, which was not very comforting at the time. But ask other people, what are you seeing? This is what I'm seeing. And if you suspect that there's a problem, go talk to somebody. Don't let stigma, the fear that you are going to be judged as a parent, keep you from getting the help that you need. Stigma is so blasé. Your kids are over stigma. They have learned how to ask for help. We need to be able to ask for help too. So, here's another little handy slide. If you do talk to a mental health professional, you might want to journal. You might want to write down some things. I think there's a problem because this is what I'm observing. I heard my child say this. I saw my child do this. My child is feeling the more information you have that you can share with a pediatrician, that you can share with a therapist, the more of a team that you are providing to create this safety net around your child. So, we have a wonderful parent handbook, free download on the Erika's Lighthouse website. Takes you through all these questions, takes you through information about therapy. I would encourage you to go to our website and take a look. I cannot talk to parents without talking about taking care of yourself and how critically important it is to take care of yourself. What are your coping strategies when you're having a hard day? What do you do to take care of yourself that's healthy? How do you practice self-care? And this quote, we were talking about it before we met with you guys tonight. Just because they don't seem to be listening, they're always watching. And I would be much more concerned about what they're observing than what they're not, taking in their ears. So remember, mental health is a balance. It's our ability to manage stress every day and still keep moving forward. There's little small things we can all do to improve our mental health, and that everyone deserves good mental health. I would encourage you to go to the Erika's Lighthouse website. It's just ericaslighthouse.org, and then just click on family engagement, and there's all sorts of resources for you. Things that you can bring home, fun activities that you could do with your kids to support mental health. And my time is up.
One little logistical thing that I failed to mention, this will be available on the website. The presentation, if you want to see slides or get details, so it's not scribble everything down. We also put note cards on your seats. If you have questions, we're going to manage the Q&A and that way. So that you can ask it
Maybe, no. Let me know at 10.
or the whole panel to the last half hour.
Oh, okay. Okay. But you can, turn it. I don't know. We're just talking about going long and
I'm keeping track of time on my phone.
yeah,
So
whether I need to be alerted or not. So, hello. I'm Kim Hassenfeld. I'm the clinical director at the Counseling Center of the North Shore in Winnetka. And I'm very happy to be here. I've been a therapist for about 17 years and work with teens, work with families, couples, and individuals. And today I'm going to be talking about stress, anxiety, and trauma, all in 15 minutes. So let's get started. So what is stress and anxiety? So like pain, anxious feelings or anxiety lets us know that something's wrong. Unlike some emotions, anxiety has a physical component to it. And, what is the difference between stress and anxiety? I'm not quite sure, but what I think of stress as sort of the physical manifestation of anxiety. So lots of people know if I ask like a group of sixth graders, how do you know when you're stressed? Or how do you know, actually I ask them, how do you know when someone else is stressed? And they'll say, they talk really loud, or they, but if you ask, how do they know? They say, my heart's beating really fast. I can't get a good deep breath. My face gets red. So these are all, I get a stomach ache, I get a headache. So these are all, manifestations of stress and anxiety. But I want to emphasize that anxiety and stress are healthy, normal emotions, as you were saying. they alert you that something's wrong, that you should pay attention. They might push you to, soldier through your presentation. I don't know. They can be helpful in small doses. In large doses, however, you can feel really overwhelmed, flooded with feeling, and or catastrophic thinking. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Oops, wrong way. So under normal circumstances, being a teenager is pretty stressful. There are a lot of things going on, and I think, Renee, you mentioned some of this, but the physical changes of your body, changes in familial expectation, please watch your sister, we're going to the movies, a lot of things. Social changes, do I fit in? Identity changes, who am I? Especially for the LGBTQ kids. So it's a big time of stressors. So think about that. And on top of that, the pandemic, for example, and all of the changes that happen there. And change, this is for a different talk, but change always is stressful to us. Even if it's a positive change, change means having to make more decisions because we're outside of our routine. And that's really what happened during the pandemic. Everything got turned upside down. Not sure if I'm going the right way. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what can happen when somebody gets really stressed, overwhelmed with feeling, and this is going to lead into trauma. So this is from Dr. Daniel Siegel, and it's a really handy model of the brain. So if you want to follow along, if you put your hand up, and then you put your thumb into your palm, and then you cover that over with your fingers. This is a really handy model of the brain. So here we have the spinal cord. And then if you open up, right here is the brain stem. And this, your thumb, symbolizes the limbic system. So the amygdala, which is in charge of regulating extreme emotion and is in part what is in charge of our emergency system, which is basically fight, flight, or freeze. So when we were, fighting a saber-toothed tiger or running from a saber-toothed tiger, we needed that limbic system to propel us forward. Adrenaline, we're hypervigilant, we can run fast, our heart's beating, and we're ready to flee. When you cover over this part, and if you sort of turn it this way, this is where your eye would be. Okay, this is the medial cortex, or this is, and up in the front, right where your forehead is, that's the prefrontal cortex. This is in charge of seeing the big picture, of thinking and feeling in context. And it's also in charge of regulating the limbic system. But when we get really stressed, we're already sort of normally stressed because it's still COVID and, there's all sorts of pressures, and then picturing a teenager getting ready for school, who's going to be there today, is this the right outfit to wear today, all sorts of things, right? Is my hair behaving? Then they realize that they forgot some important project they needed to finish. They're going to get a ride from their friend forgets to pick them up, they're going to be late. One more thing happens, whatever that is, that one last thing, and they flip their lid. Basically, the limbic system floods the whole area, and they don't have access anymore to their prefrontal cortex. And this goes with adults too, but we're talking about teens. And they really could do or say things that are outside of their normal character. We all have had this experience, right? Did I really say that? And it's because their prefrontal cortex is offline, and it takes a little bit of time for it to come back online. The adrenaline, the cortisol, all of those chemicals need to drain from your body, and then slowly you sort of get back to yourself. So, so that is, I guess I wanted to say that to say we all have those moments, and there are a lot of things that lead us to have someone pushes our emotional buttons, and we are not able to think, to be reasoned with, and you may have a teen who gets flooded, flips their lid, and they're screaming and crying, or you may have a teen who flips their lid and goes into a shutdown mode. I don't want to talk to you, slams the door, we're done. So this slide also from Dr. Daniel Siegel, and I will put a plug for his book, Brainstorm, really great about the teenage brain, and it goes into all this. This is called the window of tolerance, and he coined this. I think he coined this. Pretty sure he did. And so if you think about that middle section there as a place where everybody is functioning with their full brain, optimally, okay? Doesn't mean you're happy, doesn't mean you're even having a good day, but you are operating with all of your brain functioning for you. And everybody has a different window of tolerance, and it can move throughout your lifespan. But if you're operating within your window of tolerance, you can think, you can reason, and you can cope with whatever is thrown your way. When somebody experiences something that's traumatic, generally speaking, that means that they're pushed outside their window of tolerance. It's not the only time that you can be pushed out of your window of tolerance, but a traumatic event definitely can push someone out of their window of tolerance. If you go this way, you're in hyperarousal, and that means you're flooded with feeling, intense feeling, increased heart rate, rapid breathing. It's fight or flight. If you go that way, you go down, you go into freeze mode, emotional numbing, dissociation, which just means feeling not particularly connected to yourself, and fatigue. So we've all probably had some experiences like that. For a teenager, you know, it can be, if this is the first time they're experiencing something, it can be pretty scary. So what is trauma? We already talked about anxiety and stress. Often people think about trauma as an event, something frightening, something violent, something singular that happens to a person. But really, trauma is anything that happens externally or internally that is so distressing that it's more than a person can cope with or tolerate. So it's not what you normally think of as trauma, but that's really the definition. And I think that kind of helps us understand why a lot of times it's missed. People don't understand that somebody experienced a trauma because they couldn't see anything. This is a long list, and I won't go over the whole thing, but so there's lots of different ways. And I think in the handout I have this list as well, so you have it already. But from feeling a person appearing to be in a fog or a daze, not caring about things that used to matter, and you'll notice that a lot of these are similar to depression. Some of them are. And if a trauma response goes unchecked, it can definitely lead, in fact, probably often does lead to depression. But the good news is that if you notice a change, just like Peggy was saying, if you notice a change in your teenager, you notice that they're jumpy, they're irritable, and it's sudden. It's a sudden change. And you ask them about it, that's the first step. They have an opportunity to talk about it. And if you ask them in such a way that shows concern, and you have it take a non-judgmental stance, actually, it probably involves you taking a few deep breaths yourself, getting yourself in a place of calm, you know, maybe talking yourself down from fear and anxiety of what you might find out, and just being able to listen, not press, and then to offer help. And it's a simple thing, but it's really difficult. You may have to be persistent. You may have to try again and again. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about trauma-informed therapy. This actually goes for most therapy in general too, but you want to find, if it turns out, you know, your child has gone through, experienced a sexual assault, has, you know, had some internal experience where they feel like they failed and they feel a lot of shame and they're experiencing trauma, they're very overwhelmed. You want to find a therapist who's trauma-informed. So they understand the mind-body connection. They're not going to press your kid to share too much too quickly. They understand that it's going to take some time. They help your child figure out what their strengths are, their core values, and develop ways to communicate to you about what their experience was. Whoa, I went through that kind of fast. Woo, okay. Here we go.
Need more time, right?
Yes, it does. You can go right ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, good evening. First thing I'm going to do is ask you to all get up and change seats. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So about 4 people moved, and the rest of you just stared at me. Okay. So I'm going to pick on people in the back. Why did you choose not to move? You're starting to get up. So stay a little bit longer than most people. Okay. How about you, sir?
I was plotting.
You're plotting, mapping out where to go next. Tough route through the room. All right, what else? Over here. Why didn't you move? Didn't want to. It's always good to know where the attitude problem is. Good. All right, how about over here?
I'm shuffling papers.
Oh, very important. Very important. Yes. Okay, so here's the thing, right? You've heard up here, change is stressful. Why is it that so I'm here to talk about substance use prevention, and doing that 15 minutes is a challenge, so I'm going to do the best I can. But why is it that we have issues in our communities with substance use? Is because we give that kind of direction to kids. We say, don't use drugs. We say, just say no. But it lacks a certain follow-up direction, right? My wife was a teacher, now she's a school social worker in Urban Hills. One thing she taught me before we had kids, I had a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. She said, you've got to give multi-step direction. She used to teach really little kids. So what instead, I'd said, okay, bear with me. We're going to get up, we're going to change seats. Keep all your stuff where it is. You'll come right back in 5 minutes. We're going to do a quick activity, and then we'll be done. Go. My guess, except for maybe you, the rest of the room would have popped up, right? And gone about the business and come back. Because I would have given you a how, and I would have given you a why, right? I would have told you why we were doing it. That's what we forget to do as it relates to substance use. We've got to give our kids a how and a why. So I'm Andy Duran. I work at LEAD. LEAD is a drug prevention organization. I've been doing it for 10 years. We're based in Lake Forest, but we travel all over the country talking to kids in schools, talking to young people, hundreds of schools a year typically that we interface with. But this is home for us. I live in Lake Bluff. So here's the good news. I'm going to fly through this because you have your packet. Over the past 10 years, past 30-day use of alcohol has gone down by as much as 50% in some communities, including in communities here in the North Shore. I've studied most of these communities in the North Shore, and over the past 10 years, substance use, especially alcohol, has gone down. That's good. We still, however, have a higher rate than most places in the country for some of the reasons you've heard. We're affluent, wealthy type communities here in the North Shore, and our kids are more prone and more at risk for that. So we've got to know that. So we can't stop doing the work because we've had some success. We've got to keep it going. Here's more good news. Past 30-day use of tobacco, also down. In fact, it was almost non-existent before vaping. When we looked at our 2016 youth survey data in our local, when I'm talking about Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, Highland Park, Deerfield, Winnetka, Kenilworth, etc., when I looked at all that data from Northern Cook and Lake County, tobacco use has gone way down. Vaping happened, and boom. The entire increase was related to vaping, right? So we still, while tobacco use has gone down, vaping certainly started trending back up. It's still down, but we have a lot more work to do around vaping. One thing my organization does very quietly is a lot of policy work, both at the state level and federally, to try to make that better. Finally, past 30-day use of non-prescription pain meds and opioids is down by as much as 75%. Now, what the message I don't want you to take is that opioids aren't a problem, because they are, especially as we're talking about fentanyl and carfentanil and xylazine and all those things that we're hearing about being part of opioids right now. And I can, in a longer than 15-minute presentation, I can get into some of that. But they're down in our communities. Our communities have done a really good job of curbing non-prescription painkiller and opioid use through a series of environmental strategies, right? So I can talk more about that. And finally, a piece of good news that's changing is that past 30-day use of marijuana has remained steady despite legalization. Now here's what we see anytime marijuana is legalized. Again, whole other presentation we get. But when marijuana is legalized, we see an immediate decline, not related to the opening of the dispensaries, simply related to because the fact prevention works. And you see outcomes of the prevention work years down the road. Eventually, though, we see in Colorado and Washington, it spikes back up. Of course it would. There's more access and availability. We've seen this model play out before, right? This is nothing new. Big tobacco, big alcohol, we've seen this play out. So that is unfortunately not sustainable. So while that's good news in general, that's not sustainable. Let's look at some other not so good news. Big rise in the use of fentanyl, carfentanil, purple heroin, and xylazine, mostly among the young adult population. So if you have kids my age in high school, we're not still seeing a ton of that stuff. Even 1% of kids is still a pretty significant, percent. It's out of 1,700 students, but 17 kids, right? So we want to be aware of that. But there is a rise, and we're starting to see more and more of that be trafficked in the North Shore. So it's important that we know that. There's a lot we're doing about it, but it's important that we know that. Secondly, there's loopholes for Delta 8 and Delta 9. These are THC products that right now can be bought in gas station and smoke shops and things like that around Lake Cook County. I'm leading a whole team of people from all the way down to Springfield to hopefully fix this problem during the spring session. So more to come if any of you are interested in that policy work. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Delta 8 and Delta 9 are versions of THC. So it's a THC essentially, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, which is in the main psychoactive ingredient marijuana, and it's a version of THC that has a loophole in the law that allows it to be sold outside of a marijuana dispensary and as long as it's 18. So it has some of these same effects of THC, sometimes even stronger, but it's easier to access and easier to get, especially for 18-year-olds. Again, a whole other presentation, but something that we're totally different CBD. CBD is a different component of marijuana. Yeah, exactly. And vaping continues to be a concern, as I mentioned. So while there's some good news, there's some not good news. So what do we do about it? Here's more. Not so good news. Sorry, came in late. Here's what we do wrong. Well, we do a lot right as parents. We also do something wrong. And I put myself in this, even though I do this work, I put myself in this a lot. So oftentimes, in fact, this happened to me today. Okay, so I'm in schools all the time. I'm in schools again early in the morning. And a very well-meaning principal, it doesn't happen here in the North Shore, by the way, I think they've gotten to know us well enough, but a very well-meaning principal will come up. I'll be sitting somewhere on the side. There's a group of hundreds of kids in the auditorium, and we'll say, okay, everyone, listen up. Mr. Duran's here today from Lee. He lives in Chicago. He's here today to talk to you because all you guys are vaping, and he's here to help you to stop. Right? Okay, so two things. That sets me up for significant failure, right? If you're the kid in the crowd, what do you think? Spit it out. Yeah. Okay, maybe. What else?
Everybody's sleeping.
Yeah, so the majority of kids aren't. We've got to send this message in our homes, in our communities, in our schools that, hey, you fit into the majority by being drug-free. Even in the height of vaping use, the majority of kids were still not doing it. But we sometimes get it wrong because when we hear about it happening, here's the thing. What's your name? Renee. Okay, I'm not gonna do much. If Renee started walking around, if she started just running around the room as I'm talking, right, just running around, maybe singing the national anthem, goes back and sit. The majority of people aren't doing that, but that's the story you're going to tell when you get home, right? So this is what happens. We send the wrong message because somebody will say, Mr. Duran's here today because all you guys are making is here to stop. So if you're a kid who's not doing it, you're in the majority, then you've got an authority figure, a trusted adult, who is giving you the wrong social norm. make me think that, shoot, I really am in the minority by not doing this. Driving home the wrong message, right? Secondly, if you're the kid who is, you're one of the kids in the majority who is taking, you're like, justified. Okay, well, I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. It's part of growing up. It's part of me being who I'm supposed to be. And if my parents are at home saying, I shouldn't be doing this, and my principal is saying everybody's doing it, like, where's that, where do I fit into that message? It's a really hard message to send. We get it wrong more often than not in our community. So we've got to fix that, right? One thing that we did really well in Lake Forest and Lake Bluffs, we've got every community leader sending the same message. Like, these are the top 5 or 10 things we want kids in our community to know about substance use. Sometimes it's just that easy. We want kids to know they're the direct majority. We want kids to know this is a community that's not going to tolerate it. We're going to have a policy that supports that, things like that. So sometimes it's just complicated work, but really simplifying the message. So I'm not here today to talk about that, because even if that were true and everybody was vaping, I would be way richer and way better than I am if I could just get everybody to stop in 45 minutes, or today 15 minutes, right? So very hard. Next, we listen to the smaller but louder groups. Does this sound familiar in the climate that we're in? I'm the president of the school board in Lake Bluff. Believe me, I hear it. So here's what happens, though. I've been all around the country. I found this to be true. The first time we started doing research on this was from a series of focus groups here on the North Shore, from the New Trier area up north through Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. We did a series of focus groups with parents, probably about 50, 60 parents in each community, and just basically what were your attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs about substance use in your community. And here's what we found out. The parents in our communities, and actually I found this to be true in rural Montana, in Southern California, Florida, and everywhere else too, is that parents fit into one of 3 groups. Here's group 1. Relatively small group. Outside influence doesn't matter, they have their minds made up. Group of parents, you know them, we won't say their name, who will be the ones that host the parties. They'll say things like, I did it, why can't they? Things like, it's just part of growing up, it's just kids being kids. It's these parents that will say, as long as I have the keys, they're safe with me. You've all heard these things, right? A relatively small group, I think, but what's common about these people in this group? I'm not judging, I'm just saying what I've learned. Pretty open about it. Really open, feel like this is right. Indoctrinating others into it. Like, this is what we need to be doing as parents, training our kids how to drink now as they get to college. They don't have such a problem, even though the research says otherwise. Then, there's group 2. And they're angry with group 1. Okay. Now, this was very much my parents, the oldest of 4, my youngest brother's 13 years younger than I am. There was always a kid in the house. Like, I will tell you, honest to God, if you've heard this before, you can say this. If I had been caught drinking in high school, I'd be dead, right? Or at least grounded for life. Like, I knew what the consequences were. Okay, so that was one protective factor for me. There were others. But this is a group of parents, probably much like you, who come to these things, who learn the right messages, who are talking to their kids, who are setting up protective factors in their kids' lives, and are really kind of ticked off that this group exists, because it makes our already very complicated job of parenting, which you've heard our experts already say, even harder, right? But it's a much larger group. Why is it a smaller box up here? Very few people talk about it. It's like, I'm going to do this in my own home, but I'm afraid of being ostracized or my kid not being invited to parties because I'm going to be that parent who doesn't do it. So it seems quiet. So then you're left with the largest group that's on the fence. And what does it look like the norm is? It looks like the norm is 1, right? So it says, well, if I'm on the fence and I see some elements of group 1 that I agree with and some elements of group 2, I'm more likely, this is what I found, more likely to go towards what seems like the norm and just say, oh, you know, it's prom night, it's graduation, all the kids are doing it, this is the time. Okay? Think about the message that sends our kids. So we got to fix that. We also sometimes overreact in our own homes. You got some of this up here already from our speakers. This is from an actual conversation I had with a student and a family who I work with. The student and the family giving me permission to use this text thread. So what happened is the kids at home, okay? Or sorry, kids at school, mom's at home. High school student, named Miss McKenzie, doesn't have her car with her, leaves her car at home. Mom decides to kind of look for her daughter's car, right? She finds this and sends this picture. It's a little tin on the dash or on the console with little white things in it. So, don't do a conclusion. It says, explain what these are and why they're in your car now. Okay, now, she's at school. I know my kids can't just use their phone and they don't respond to text messages at school, right? And by the way, Mackenzie has 711 unread messages there. So how she's going to see her mom, I'm not exactly sure, okay? So, explain what these are, why they're in your car now. All right, so, mom's getting upset. on, Mackenzie. Also calling murder this time. Okay? 4 minutes pass. Mom's getting what? Increasingly escalated, agitated. What kind of drug is that? You better tell me and do not lie, or I will go get it and you tested. Not exactly that easy, but you better tell me. Jumping to a conclusion, making an accusation, being highly emotional. 3 things we don't want to do when talking to our kids about anything difficult, right? Next. Finally, Mackenzie responds, Mom, all caps, put one in your mouth. Now, what is your response to that? Are you high right now? I'm not going to do that, right? Mackenzie also says, Mom, do it. And then because we're in a church setting, I did bleep out this last part of that text here. Mom, do it. Use your imagination. Mom, after a pause, says, I'm sorry. Mackenzie says, what were they? Mom says they were. Yeah, see, a reasonable, rational side of us can understand that's what that was. Wrong way to have a conversation with your kid, right? Not overly emotional, not talking about it when you're escalated, but can we all place ourselves in the situation? Absolutely, right? Okay, so how do we do it then? Let's look at this. How to talk to your kids about drinking. I'm just using drink. You could insert whatever, because the work we do is never about the substance, by the way. That's an important piece of our work. We changed the way we started doing this, 8 years ago after I learned a little bit more coming into the job. I'll go in and talk about substances sometimes, but our work is not about the substance, because the substance will always change. Like, we didn't know what some of these substances that exist now were when I started my job. We don't know what's going to come down the road 5 or 10 years now. We can guess, we have some ideas, but we want kids making healthy choices, using positive coping strategies, finding natural highs, taking care of their mental health, building up protective factors, building a community that doesn't tolerate this kind of behavior and sets the right expectations, so that no matter what the substance is, it doesn't matter, right? What matters is the way they're set up to avoid it. So, how to talk to your kids about drinking. First of all, don't do it that way where parents on one side of the table, pointing fingers, kids at the other, head down, okay? Here's a better way to do it. How to talk to your kids, change that. How to talk with your teens. Hard to see on here because they're soon to be adults we want to deeply invest in. So, I get asked all the time, I need a script. I literally get called and emailed all the time. I need a way to talk to them. We're going to sit down and have a family meeting on Friday night. We're going to talk about substance use. I want to make sure they know that I don't tolerate their use. Okay, you got the right idea. The execution of it needs some work. Okay, so first of all, what we always say is 60 one-minute conversations is far greater than one 60-minute conversation. Take the pressure off yourself, right? This doesn't need to be this long, drawn-out thing with science and data and brain stem research and all that stuff. You can get that out in little pieces. But it's like the magician, right? I speak every year at a conference in Rhode Island. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's a youth conference. For years and years in a row, there's a magician that comes on and does the fun part, and I come and do the heavy part. We got stuck in the Providence, Rhode Island airport after a long storm last two Julys ago. I think it was last July. And much to my surprise, I see this guy, always want to learn magic. So I said, hey, we're stuck. He's going back to New York. I'm going back to Chicago. Can you just show me some tricks? Now, what do you think he said? I expected him to say no. Much to my surprise, for the next 45 minutes to an hour, he was whipping out trick after trick after trick after trick. And I couldn't wait to get home and show my wife what a great magician I had become while away for a couple days. I get home and guess what? I remember absolutely nothing. The magician's actual credo is tell everybody nothing, or tell them so much they remember nothing, and that's what we tend to do with our kids. So, making sure we have short, brief spurts of conversations. You know your kid better than I ever will, better than any of us ever will, so you know what's going to hit them, right? In the car, yes, that was a big one for me when I was growing up with my parents. In a place that's comfortable, sitting next to them at a football game or a baseball game, right? The family dinner table, just a short-minute conversation so that you're understanding what they're feeling. You can easily express your discontent or your disapproval, your expectations for them, right? But just making sure that you are not really loading it up. Number 2, know your influence. The number 1 reason that teens across the United States, especially from the North Shore, choose not to use a substance is because of you. The number 1 thing they say is that the number 1 reason I don't use it is because of you. We cross-tabbed a bunch of data from the North Shore, and what we do is a cohort of students that said they had had a drink of alcohol and those who hadn't. Of those students who said that they had a conversation with their parents where they knew their parents disapproved of their alcohol use, by the way, similar substances and similar data, on the North Shore is 50% less likely to use a substance, and Lake Forest Lake Bluff was 55% less likely to use a substance. The number 1 protective factor, even if your kid says you think your kid doesn't listen to you, is that. So if you do nothing else, make sure that they know that you disapprove or strongly disapprove of any of this sort of substance use. translate to behavior, which is really great. Number 3 is make sure we set the right expectations. We all know what this sign means, right? Okay, it means park and make sure that you are, if you have an electric vehicle or a hybrid or something like that, you can park in a spot. Well, I grew up in Florida. I go to Florida often. I have an employee in Florida, and I go down there all the time. Every time I go to Florida, even when I grew up there, I find something new, right? This is a new one. This is in Ocala, Florida, middle of the state. Yeah, the guy's technically following the rule, right? Loosely, but technically, I actually waited to try to see if I could find who this guy was. It was parked there because I wanted to talk to him. Then I got nervous about doing that. So, we do this though. Like, don't drink. Okay? Why and how? Like, I know what it means. You know the message you're trying to send. Kids don't receive it the same way, right? So we've got to find a way to make it accurate and relevant. Relevant to our kid that says, don't want you drinking, set the right expectations, and be super, super clear about it, right? Very, very important. Number 4, understand the root cause. This is really important. I'm not going to go into this because our other speakers have gone into this, but what is it that they're feeling that's causing this behavior? What's driving it? What's happening? There's a problem, there's the root cause, and there's the conditions that exist in their local environment that cause this behavior to happen, right? So the problem answers what, the root cause answers why, and the local condition is why here. Why in my house, in my neighborhood, is this happening with my kid? Or is this not happening with my kid? Because if we just look at the problem and start throwing solutions at the wall, we're going to fail. If we actually look at the local conditions and respond to each of those, then we have more. This is one thing that we help with at least. I'm a big believer that behavior equals desire plus belief. So if a teen desires to feel better in the moment after, the moment before, they will drugs to make them feel that way. Drugs get you high, it does. That's why people do it, right? And they believe that they're not going to get in trouble because you don't care. They're more likely to engage in that behavior. If you flip that around and say, I desire to have great things in my life coming up, and I believe that there's important trusted adults in my life who care about my decisions, then I'm less likely to make them listen choice, right? So I am a big believer in that equation. This is one thing you can do at home tonight if you want. Very simple. Maybe this is more like a 2-minute conversation, but it can be a quick one. I'm actually doing this in a classroom tomorrow of 7th graders. If we ask students, one of the things I'm going to close with, if we ask students, why is it that even though the majority of young people are drug-free, why is it that some people still choose to get involved? These are the things they'll say, right? Nothing surprising. To fit in, to look cool, everybody's doing it, to cope with stress or pressure or anxiety, sometimes just to get drunk or high, okay? Not surprising. If we flip that around and say, okay, of all the people you know, including yourself, who have chosen not to involve themselves with this sort of behavior, what are the reasons they've chosen that? What's their secret? This is what teens will say. Don't want to get in trouble. From parent to law. I want to get into college. I want to have success in sports or clubs or theater. My parents will kill me. Impact on future relationships, etc. Now, what do you notice about all the ones on the left? Fit in. To look cool. Get high. What do you notice? External. Right. Students always get this. Those things are right, but they're very short-term and now focused. They will get you out of the moment that you're in, perhaps feeling better, but it's temporary, it's external, it's short-term. All the things on the right are the opposite. They're long-term future focused. We want our kids making sure that they understand that we don't make a decision to sacrifice our long-term, future-forward self for short-term impact. So what can you do? Number 1, start a conversation tonight when you get home. Quick, 1 minute, 2 minutes, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Set the right expectations to be sure your teen understands this. By the way, sometimes that means your own behavior, like going home and saying, it's been a long day, I need a glass of wine. Nothing is wrong about either of those things. You can have long days and communicate it. You can have a glass of wine because I think you're over 21, most of you. Some 2 or 3 times that. Make sure you're separating those 2 things. I've had a really long, stressful day. Great. We talked about that as a family. I'm going to go have a glass of wine. If a teen sees as the coping mechanism, that's where we go wrong, right? Same thing with drunk driving. I'm a huge drunk driving prevention advocate. My grandfather was killed by a drunk driver when I was in high school. The driver was a classmate of mine. It's a story I tell kids in the different situations. Why I went into the work I go into. So I'm a huge drunk driving prevention advocate. What I will never say, what I'll never want a parent to say, is don't drink. But if you do, don't drive. We've got to send both messages clearly, independently. We don't want a kid to think as well, you don't want me to drink, but what you're actually telling me is that I do, you just don't want me to make that next wrong choice, right? So if your teen or someone you know needs help and you don't know where to start, call us. We, my team, and me specifically, are really, really good at helping parents navigate the system. Getting you into counselors maybe you can't get into, helping you navigate somebody needs drug treatment or get to the hospital. We are really, really good about that. I'm on call almost every day of the year, anytime. So please don't ever hesitate to call. Know the resources that are available. You've got a handout tonight for some of those, or call us. And don't be afraid to be that parent. Who's that parent? It's this. My kid. Dad, all my friends have Snapchat, TikTok, freedom, parties, their own phone. Why are you so strict? Always say this. I'm sorry, I must love you more than those other parents love their children. You're welcome. To the point where I start to breathe and my daughters can say that sentence. Not a perfect parent by any stretch. I make mistakes every day. What I will say, though, is that this is a really hard thing for me to do back. Be that parent. It's the harder thing to do. Our kids deserve it. So there's my information. Please feel free to reach out anytime I can be of help. Thanks very much.
Okay, great. This is working. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hill. I am a therapist at Midwest Counseling and Diagnostics, located in Northbrook, and we also have a location in downtown Chicago. I do not speak as my primary aspect of my profession. I am more of a listener. I am a therapist. I listen and respond and, provide recommendations. So thank you for listening to me. Especially considering that I'm the last speaker. So, thank you for being awake. Okay. Oh, right. So the first thing that I'm going to be speaking about are eating disorders. I'm a certified eating disorder specialist. Most of my caseload are people with eating disorders, among some other things, and I also treat adolescents with eating disorders. So, one thing to be aware of are that eating disorders are very prevalent among adolescents. And as these statistics say here, 13% of adolescents will develop an eating disorder by the age of 20. That is a lot. And it's also important to know that this is maybe not the same kind of eating disorder we, learned about in the media or what we may have learned about growing up. There's a lot more information out there than there used to be. And the most common eating disorder is actually binge eating disorder. And that one is relatively new in the diagnostic criteria, but is really important to know about and can also be underdiagnosed among those who have it. And also athletes are at increased risk for eating disorders for any of you whose kids are in sports. Another important thing that I want to mention are males. So back not that long ago, the big statistic was 1 in 10 people with eating disorders were male. 90% female, 10% male. As you can see here, those numbers have changed. There are much higher rates of males with eating disorders. And this may be due to underreporting or stigma, or again, just not even, crossing someone's mind to ask questions about someone's eating habits or concerns around food or their body. And then it's also important to know that trans and gender diverse youth are at greater risk. So a lot of the statistics are broken down into male, female, but for those who don't fall into those categories, they are at greater risk. So again, this is something that needs to be assessed, and that when they're going to their pediatricians, hopefully they're checking in on, or if you have any concerns, making your pediatrician aware. So some signs and signals of eating disorders can be weight changes. This could be up or down, but it also could be falling off of one's growth curve. I've worked with clients where their weight has stayed the same, and therefore maybe it was missed for a while, but just falling off the growth curve can be an issue. Skipping meals, preoccupation with food or healthy eating, preoccupation with body image, anxiety around eating, Missing food, so if suddenly there's a bunch of food missing in your home, or you see wrappers, that could be a sign of binge eating. Inability to eat shared food with peers or family members, so there could be anxiety about certain foods. Lots of time spent in the bathroom, that could indicate purging. Wearing baggy clothing so that body shape is not visible. And also, there are high comorbidities with depression and anxiety, so if your kids struggle with that at all, just keep an eye out for any eating concerns. And I really want to drive home the message that you cannot see an eating disorder. Just because someone might be underweight or overweight does not mean that they have an eating disorder, but it's also important to know that most people with eating disorders are actually at a seemingly normal weight. So weight in and of itself is not going to indicate a whole lot. There are a lot of different types of eating disorders that I have listed here. But I just want you to know that weight is not the biggest factor involved, and also body weight and shape concerns are not the only types of eating disorders out there. Some eating disorders have nothing to do with that. I'm not going to go into the detail about that here unless you have questions in the Q&A. So again, I will drive home that individuals in normal or larger bodies can have eating disorders just as severe as those in very thin bodies. Those with atypical anorexia are especially high risk for medical complications. I've worked with a number of clients who have atypical anorexia, which is basically where their weight is not significantly low, who've had very severe eating disorders that have affected them, not only psychologically, but also medically. So just keep that in mind when you're interacting with your teens. So what are some methods and approaches for dealing with eating disorders? First of all, get them into therapy. Once they see a therapist, from there they can recommend whether more treatment is needed, whether that's including a dietitian who specializes in eating disorders, including a psychiatrist, or if they recommend a higher level of care. But we want to make sure that if you're bringing your child to see a therapist for eating disorders, that you're working with somebody who is especially trained in eating disorders, because it can do sometimes more harm than good to work with someone who maybe thinks they know about eating disorders, but it's really out of their scope of practice. So you want to look for somebody who's either a certified eating disorder specialist or a certified eating disorder registered dietitian, or you can look at their LinkedIn profile and see where they worked before or what their experience is, or you could just ask them directly, what is your training in eating disorders? You want somebody who knows what they're doing. And if they don't, then hopefully they would refer you to someone who does know. If your child is working with a therapist already for other issues and it turns out that they also have an eating disorder, you can work with that therapist and figure out what the best treatment plan is, but it's probably going to mean either adding or changing services so that they can get that support around the eating disorder. Okay. I'm not going to go a whole lot into more of the methods and approaches of treatment interventions, but I will just say that when it comes to parental involvement, it's really important. If parents are involved in their child's treatment, it improves their prognosis for recovery significantly. So, as parents, what can you do if you see these signs and symptoms coming up? First, don't wait. Get them some help. And discuss your concerns with your child and with the pediatrician, and educate yourself. There are lots of websites out there. A couple are listed here. And also, eat regular meals as a family. I know that can be extremely difficult with everybody's schedules, but even if it's just one parent or one person eating with that child, it makes a huge difference just to have that consistency and that connection. And that includes breakfast. Again, I know that's easier said than done, but it really does help. You also want to model a balanced relationship with food. And if you have your own complicated relationship with food, just work on it for yourself. That it's something that, we have all been socialized in a culture that values thinness, and dieting is a big thing in our culture. So work on your relationship with food. You can do that with a therapist, or you could do that on your own, or amongst friends or people that you trust, but it's definitely worth exploring yourself. And also adopt an all foods fit and health at every size approach. Again, I can do a whole topic or a whole presentation on that. And please don't blame yourself. There are so many reasons why people develop an eating disorder. There are so many different factors. There is a genetic component. I work with a lot of families where parents experience a lot of guilt. But again, don't blame yourself, because there's just a lot. There are so many different factors at play. Yes? Oh, yes. Okay. So an all foods fit approach is basically not labeling foods as good or bad. This is something that I think, at least I grew up just thinking was normal, and is probably more common than not. So not labeling the cookies as bad and the salad as good, and recognizing that we can eat everything in moderation, and that is going to help somebody have a more balanced relationship with food. That we can still enjoy the cookie and enjoy the salad and not feel guilty about it, or feel like we have to only eat these extra healthy foods and only avoid these other types of foods. A lot of our young people end up, for our restrictors, where they kind of fall down more of a path of not letting themselves eat any of the so-called unhealthy food. And then for our more binge, maybe purge type individuals, that it's all or nothing. It's only this way, and then I'm binging on all the bad food and maybe getting rid of it afterwards. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on to self-harm, or in the clinical world, we call non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, and I'll use those terms interchangeably. Okay, so again, these rates are pretty high. We're looking at 15 to 20% of teens who engage in non-suicidal self-injury, but the prevalence rates increase around, they go up, they're the highest around 15 to 16 years old, and then decline towards late adolescence. There are some risk factors, such as being female, contact with self-harm in either social interactions or through the media. So if peers are engaging in self-harm and sharing that with others, that can increase risk. Also bullying and adverse childhood experiences, such as emotional abuse or neglect, or other types of traumas. And it's also, again, more common among trans youth, especially those who may be experiencing other mental health conditions. So a few things to know. Non-suicidal self-injury, in the name, is non-suicidal. So it's not an attempt, it's not a suicide attempt. It's an attempt to cope with distress, or sometimes a feeling of numbness in the moment, and it is short term. And for some, it can also be a form of communication or a cry for help. It may not be quite as deliberate, like, oh, I'm going to do this so that mom and dad can see, but it's a way, again, to express that that experience that's happening inside. And non-suicidal self-injury is not always used with tools. It could be hitting oneself, or it could even be scratching oneself. It also could be passive. So I've actually worked with people with eating disorders who use that as a form of non-suicidal self-injury, of withholding food or some other type of punishment towards themselves. So it's not always visible. And again, it can co-occur with other mental health disorders. And some signs and signals included here injuries, of course, hiding their skin, some significant changes in mood, a triggering or traumatic event, isolating. Again, we're trying to look, as others have said, like we're trying to look at changes in your child's patterns, showing interest in self-harm, and then also poor emotion regulation. Not the sadness, fear, and anger, those aren't the signs, but it's the poor regulation of those emotions. Another one that I didn't list on here is very low self-esteem and even expressing that verbally. So again, like eating disorders, we want to, for those who are exhibiting a pattern of self-injury, we want to get those kids into seeing an individual therapist. And usually there's, mindfulness or behavioral therapies involved that can be helpful. And it's also important to know that oftentimes there's a harm reduction model going on. We can't necessarily expect someone who's been self-injuring 5 days a week to suddenly stop, and that it's going to take some time, and that there are ways to do that. And then again, that therapist could assess for a higher level of care. And when I say higher levels of care, what I mean is a treatment program. So if weekly therapy is not enough to help somebody, then there are programs out there that are more intensive that can help people who are struggling in a more significant way. So what are some things that you can do as parents if you see this going on? You can first talk to your teen, offer compassion. Don't freak out. I feel like that would be easy to do, but try to calm yourself before having that conversation and ask questions coming from a place of curiosity and love and concern. Don't try to reward or punish them for their behavior in any way, and just, again, try to show care and understanding. Check for injuries. This is important, and it may seem invasive. I've had clients where they say, my mom made me show them my body, and it's very uncomfortable. But it's also necessary to either check for injuries or have the pediatrician do a body check, because sometimes those injuries are pretty deep and need medical attention, whether it's just at-home care or from an actual physician. So that's why we need to check for injuries and treat them if applicable. And then, again, if applicable, removing all or certain types of sharps, as they call them, from the home. Again, you may not have to remove your kitchen knives, but it might be that your daughter is self-harming in the bathroom by herself, and so you make a plan so that maybe you keep the shaving razors and you give it to her when she's ready to shower, and she gives it back to you when she's done. Those things, just removing those easy triggers can be helpful, but again, it's helpful to have those conversations both with your child and with the therapist. Okay. So I know I said that self-harm, also known as non-suicidal self-injury, is non-suicidal behavior. However, there is a high correlation between those who struggle with self-harm or non-suicidal self-injury and suicidal ideation, and is also a risk factor for suicide attempts and completed suicides. So it's important, again, to establish some kind of safety plan in concert with the therapist, because if there are also those suicidal thoughts going on, it's important to have a plan in place so that everybody is aware of what happens when your child's distress goes to a 9 out of 10 and they don't know if they feel safe. So that can be really helpful. I've worked with families on that, and it can be a really useful tool to come back to, because we want everybody to have open lines of communication and understanding that even if mom and dad don't understand my deep personal issues, they at least know when I need more help, or they at least know when I'm feeling unsafe and what they can do to support me in that. And that goes a long way. Okay, here are some resources that, again, a few of them I mentioned before. I don't think anybody mentioned the National Suicide Hotline, but they have the 3-digit number 988. There's also a crisis text line that you can call, and these are numbers that you can reach out to even if your child is not immediately going to the emergency room, but you can call even if you're kind of on the fence or need some guidance. So, or if you have any questions or would like more information, you're welcome to contact me at my contact information here. So, thank you.
Thank you guys for all your presentations. I think that's a ton of really useful information. Yay! I'm going to go ahead and read this question, and I think it's an awesome one. How are these issues related, and how do you figure out what to address first? Let's say if a child has anxiety and then uses substances to cope. Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I mean, I start certainly from a substance use perspective. This is what we call comorbidity, where there's two or co-occurring disorders, or two or more co-occurring disorders. Sorry, it's been a long day. Certainly, if the child has anxiety and is using substances to cope, the underlying issue is the anxiety. And while both need to be addressed, certainly having this student, depending on their age, see their pediatrician, see a counselor, perhaps get on medication, see a psychiatrist if you need to go up to that level, but whatever it is to cope with the underlying anxiety, and also to teach some positive coping strategies. So not to ignore either issue, but make sure we're treating the underlying issue as the primary. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
And that's also why getting a good diagnosis is really important, because the treatment for stress and anxiety is going to be different than the treatment for depression. So you want to really work with a practitioner to get a pretty solid diagnosis before you start delving into treatment.
So I've heard that particularly for adolescents, it's very difficult to find appropriate therapists, that it's like you have to, there's a waiting list, those kinds of things. I'm just curious, in this area, in this geographic area, is that also the case, or are things a little more accessible here just because the resource is here? I really don't know, but I understand that it's a nationwide problem of availability for mental health treatment for adolescents.
That's a great question. I'm happy to.
You're in a position to answer that.
Yeah, so I think that we are in a community that is resourced fairly well around mental health. And we also have a number of community mental health service agencies that can provide service even to folks who don't have the means to pay for service in a way that many in the community can. Having said that, we still have wait lists for service. And sort of depending on where you go, you're going to find different wait lists. I don't know if you can speak to yours. At Family Service Center at this point, we are full for after school and evening appointments, but our wait list is probably within a month of getting in. So if you make a call and get the ball rolling, you're not waiting a ton. If you've got a young adult, for example, who's home for whatever reason and can be seen during the day, they're probably going to get easier access sooner, I would say, pretty much across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
Yeah, we have seen a growing need, and so we're expanding our counseling center. But right now, the wait list, we don't really have a wait list, but we are a bit full. And similarly, in terms of evenings and weekends, it's harder to get in. And then there's also the matter of, do you want to use your insurance? And you're paying for it. Most people want to use their insurance, and so there are. If you have Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO, you're in good shape. If you have something else, it's a little harder to find people who take it. Actually, our center takes pretty much everything. So that's a good thing. But it is kind of difficult.
I think that's a great point, that there's a need that the community mental health service agencies provide by way of accepting insurances that reimburse at a lower rate. So private clinicians don't typically get paneled with those insurance companies because it's financially not the greatest business plan, understandably.
But if you're
fair
not
enough.
for profit and
You're
your
not for
mission
profit,
is
yeah.
to be accessible, then
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would also say one little piece of advice. It's interesting when I talk to parents who will pull their kid out of school for a dentist appointment, or pull their kid out of school for getting their arm looked at if they broke their arm, but won't do it for a counselor. Will wait 30 to 60 days to see somebody in the evening. I would say it's a perfectly appropriate use to put their kid out of school to see a counselor, and knowing that there are more daytime options available. That's always the advice that I give to parents when they call. Is even if you can't get in with the person you want, take the appointment you can get, have them work with your child, and then you can work. If that works out, great. If not, then you can always get on the waiting list for the person as well. But to start by taking some of those appointments in the meantime. Schools are 100% better about this. The state of Illinois now allows 5 mental health days per year per kid with no excuse. They're in a public school. So use those public, mental health days if you need to, and don't have to wait.
It's a good question.
That's a great point, Andy.
Yeah.
And also look for groups from your school or at your school. If your parents are going through a divorce, or kids are having trouble making friends, especially in the younger grades. A lot of the social workers will run socialization groups, or really every topic. And at New Trier, they have groups for kids who've experienced loss, among every other thing at New Trier, right? But look for groups too if you can't get into, or if you're on a waiting list for individuals.
And about that as it relates to school, every kid has access to their school social worker in a public school. You do not have to have an IEP. You do not have to have a 504 plan. That's a common misperception, coming from my wife's a school social worker, and I'm on the school board. So every kid has the right to see a school social worker. So don't think that just because they don't have a diagnosis, or that it's impacting their learning or something like that they can't. Every kid has a right to do that. So make sure you know who that person is and can see them.
And I would also say give it time. I mean, the first therapist that you find may not be the right fit, but give it a little time. Don't ask right away, do you like the therapist? And they're going to go, no, because you're building a relationship. So, but if, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, you're not seeing any change, and they're, then, start that process of trying to find somebody else.
And the other thing I would say about that, and it's an excellent point, is, with teenagers, I mean, with adults, it's really hard to tell your therapist, hey, when you said that, it really bothered me, or I don't like that. I wish we could do more of this. I don't really like this. I wish we could do more of this. But if your teenager is telling you that, and they give you permission, share it with the therapist, because we as therapists really want to know. We work hard to be really in touch with your kid and really, try and take signals from them. But any kind of communication like that is really helpful.
Do you have advice on how to talk to your kid about their therapy sessions without, getting in too deep and into things that they don't want to talk about, and learn that, no, the therapist is doing this that I don't like, or this that I do?
Yeah, I think initially it's good to not ask too many questions, and as Peggy was saying, just, as long as they're wanting to go, that's a good sign. If they're wanting to go, they're getting something. There's something going on there. But if they're not wanting to go, if they're making excuses, if they're wanting to cancel because of this, that, or the other, that might be a time to ask. So what's going on? Are you not finding it helpful? What's happening? Yeah.
I think I would add, too, it's a great point. I think that when I work with adolescents and when we approach working with adolescents, really one of the goals in that initial sort of informed consent process is to really think about privacy, the limits of privacy, parent involvement, and get an understanding of what the sort of flow of communication is going to be like. We want to secure a safe environment for the adolescent to be able to talk, And if there's someone who is interested in parent being involved, we want to know that and understand how to do that communication, when to do it, potentially set up a frequency with which we touch base, and be really transparent about that, so
Yes.
that there's no concern that all the details of the session are going to parent, right?
Right.
So trying to really set that up in advance and clarify expectations and work collaboratively, and having the adolescent have some part in saying that,
Right, absolutely.
aside
That's
from
fantastic.
risk stuff.
Yeah, aside from risk stuff.
Aside from
But,
high-risk
but to
stuff.
be able to say in advance, you know, when I meet with a teen, I ask about that, like, what is your communication with your parents about this? And how would you feel if your parent called me and had something to say? I would definitely share that with you. Is there something that you really want to tell your parent that I can help you talk to them about? Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
If you're a community member and you know a young person who is struggling, you don't know the details, but you'd love to help in any way you possibly could, any advice for people who are not, the primary caregivers about how you help young people?
It's a great question. Anybody want to respond to that? I can
Really
take a
good
start.
question.
Yeah, I can take a start. I think, we talked a little bit about, I don't know, maybe Peggy, you named it. I was talking about the parent-child relationship being a super protective factor.
Right.
Right, and I think, Peggy, you talked a little bit about sort of any trusting adult connection can be a protective factor in a lot of ways. And I think about the importance of a relationship that might be outside the parental relationship role. So if you have a close relationship, with a youth, a teenager, and you have concerns about how they're doing, I think it's very reasonable to have a conversation with them about that directly, and try to explore that and name that there's help out there. I think one of you guys were talking about, we deserve mental health, right? You deserve to feel differently. You deserve to sort of experience life in a more positive way without as much pain and suffering. So being able to kind of put it in context, I think, is a reasonable thing to do. Having said that, I don't know how the parent piece, factors in. I wouldn't want to sort of undermine parental authority in any way, but certainly opening the door to start thinking about that and what the possibilities might be could be a good way.
Yeah, I mean, any of us could become a young person's trusted adult. Somebody that they confide in, or you have a conversation and you say, I've observed this, I've seen you in the community, I'm concerned about you, you just don't look happy, or this is what I've overheard. But as a trusted adult, our job is to get that young person to help, to get that person to the right people that are going to help them. And in that case, it may be informing the parent. Now, a lot of times parents don't want that information either. And, you may risk a relationship with the parent. But, I think the message is, as I said earlier, you deserve to feel better. There's lots of help out there. How are we going to get you to somebody that's going to help you? Because that's what you deserve.
Well, and there are two things going on here at Kenilworth Union. One is teaching the adults the mental health first aid through Jacqueline Center's program, and that is exactly what you're talking about, which is, I'm not a therapist, well, I am a therapist, but let's say you're not a therapist, but you want to help. It is important that we as a community act on it, get them to help. Let them know that their school has a social worker. Now does somebody know the exact laws of how many times kids can go see school social workers without telling their parents?
5 times,
I think it's 5
I think it's
Yeah.
5.
So you could do
8.
that if the person is middle school age or whatever. Every school has a social worker, so they just go have a place to talk. And that's all you have to do is to say, you have a place to talk. You have a safe place at school. So there you've helped open a door there. That doesn't always make parents feel comfortable, depending on what's going on and if there's something going on with the parents. But we're also doing that here with the kids, with the youth here, to teach them to be advocates, to have their friends get help. And that's kind of a nice feeling, and I know we're going to be doing that with the youth group. So.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I also think, remember, we are also going to start loving them before they're in trouble. We're also going to start loving them and having fun with them and talking to them about normal things. And so if you have young people that you can be with in a happy way, a meaningful way, then it's a lot easier to say, oh, you're looking a little sad. Are you okay? Because you already had an experience with that child.
I think that makes great sense.
I want my daughters to talk to you, actually.
Peggy said it too, teach them the natural high too.
Yeah.
I was laughing with somebody earlier saying, our next panel should be about crocheting and guitar playing and singing and
Baking and all the things that your kids love to do.
cookie decorating, because these things need to come back into the kids' lives as a natural high. Something they feel good about, something they can work on, and suddenly they find they're in a different mood.
To your point, I'm thinking about one of my sort of favorite parenting books. Sticks, Rudd, and Johnson are the authors. They put a book out in 22. It was called What Do You Say? It was a follow-up to the Self-Driven Child, maybe? But they talk about the importance of establishing that relationship with your kid early on.
Yes.
And can you take 1 hour a week out of the bajillion hours that are in the week and do something individually, one-on-one with your kid, to establish positive time with them, so that when these things come up, it's an easier conversation because you're already connected and the focus is not always about the problems that are going on, right? It fosters a lot of care and concern and support. So I think that's a great point. All right. Anybody else? Great question.
It's cookie time, I guess. But there's one last thing that we would love. I mentioned earlier that we haven't done this in a while, and we're trying to figure out what's the right way to do it and bring some value to KUC and the Kenilworth Union community. There's a little questionnaire at your seat. If you wouldn't mind filling that out and telling us what you thought about sort of the format of this one, as well as what you'd love to see in the future. Are there specific topics that you'd like to see addressed? Kind of in keeping with, I guess, first of all, our mission, which is more youth-oriented, but honestly, if there's broader things, we'll pass it along to the adult education